Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashte Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtaki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. It's good to be back among the devotees. Seek your blessings so that I could speak something meaningful. We are reading from Canto 8, Chapter 17, titled The Supreme Lord Agrees to Become Aditi's Son. We are going to cover text 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we have text number 7 on the board. So I will read text 4 to 6 and then text number 7. We can chant together. Tasya pradhura bhutata bhagwan adi purusha pita vashascha turbahu shankha chakra gadadhara tam nitra gocharam vikshya shashothaya sadaram nanama bhuvi kayena dandavat priti vihivala Sutaya badhanjali iditam stita nutsheha ananda jalakulekshana babhuva tushnim pula kakularakrish tad darshanate yutsava gatra vipatuhu pritya shaner gada gadaya giram harim Prityashane gada gadaya giraharim Tushtava sa devi aditi kurudvaha Tushtava sa devi aditi kurudvaha Yudvikshati sapi bhati vachakshusa Ramapatim Yagyapatim Jagatpatim Pritya Shaner Gada Gadaya Giraharim Tushtava Sadevi Aditi Kurudva Yudvikshati Sa Pibhavati Chakshusa Ramapatim Yagyapatim Jagatpatim Pritya Shaner Gadgadaya Giraharim Tushtava Sadevi Aditi Kurudvaha Yudvikshati Sa Pibhati Va Chakshusa Ramapatim Yagyapatim Jagatpatim Gadgadaya Giraharim Yiti Kurudvaha Yudvikshati Sa Pibhavati Va Chakshusha Ramapatim Yagyapatim Jagatpatim Pritya Shaner Gadgadaya Giraharim Tushtava Sadevi Aditi Kurudvaha Udvikshati sa pibati va chakshusha. Rama patim yagya patim jagat patim. Pritaya shanir gad gadaya girahari. Tushtava sadevi aditi kurudvaha. Udvikshasati sa pibuteva chakshusha. Rama patim yagya patim jagat patim. So I'll read a translation of 4, 5 and 6 and then we'll come to number 7. My dear king, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, dressed in yellow garments and bearing a conch shell, disc, club and lotus in his four hands, then appeared before Aditi. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead became visible to Aditi's eyes, Aditi was so overwhelmed by transcendental bliss that she at once stood up and then fell to the ground like a rod to offer the Lord her respectful obeisances. Aditi stood silently with folded hands, unable to offer prayers to the Lord. Because of transcendental bliss, tears filled her eyes, and the hairs on her body stood on end. Because she could see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, she felt ecstasy, and her body trembled. Now let's do synonyms and then translation. Pritayaha, because of love. Sanehe, again and again. Gadgadaya, faltering. Giraha, with a voice. Harim, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tushtava, pleased. Saha, she. Devi, the demigoddess. Aditi, Aditi. Kuru Udvaha, O Maharaj Parikshit. Udviksati, while staring. Sa, she. Pibati Iva, appeared as if she were drinking. Chakshusha, through the eyes. Rama Patim, unto the Lord, the husband of the goddess of fortune. Yagyapatim, unto the Lord, the enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies. Jagatpatim, the master and lord of the entire universe. Translations and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O Maharaj Parikshit, the demigoddess Aditi then began offering her prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a faltering voice and with great love. She appeared as though drinking through her eyes the Supreme Lord, who is the husband of Goddess of Fortune, the enjoyer of all sacrificial ceremonies, and the master and lord of the entire universe. Purport. After observing the Payovrata, Aditi was certain that the Lord had appeared before her as Ramapati, the husband of all good fortune, just to offer her sons all opulences. She had performed the yajna of Payovrata under the direction of her husband, Kashyapa, and therefore she thought of the Lord as Yajnapati. She was completely satisfied to see the Master and Lord of the entire universe come before her to fulfill her desire. Om Agyantimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha kalpatarubhescha kripa sindhu bhayaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So these are very interesting descriptions we are reading these days. So the setting is that demigods have been defeated, or actually they were so scared of the demons that they went away and hid themselves somewhere. So obviously the mother, their mother Aditi, wife of Kashyap Muni, she was very worried, like any other mother. If you know, the mother doesn't, its only exception is our temple. When on Sunday feast, the mothers are just chatting and the kids are somewhere else. They are not worried at all. But I have seen outside, if you go, the mothers really keep an eye on their child. And if for a few minutes the child is not visible, the mother is really worried. So same is the case with Aditi here. So because she was in such a great anxiety and she was morose, when Kashyap Muni came back to the ashram of Aditi, he inquired that why she is feeling that way. And then, though he knew, being such a elevated soul, he knew exactly what is going on, but he still wanted to hear from Aditi. And Aditi, of course, poured her heart out that all her children, her sons, the demigods, they are in such a great difficulty, being, punished by demons. So she wanted to find a solution for that. And then Kashyap Muni asked her to observe Payo Vrata. So Payo, I think Payo means milk. So if we read the previous chapter, it is explained how she was to observe this Vrata so that the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, would be pleased with her. And this is again a very natural thing for a mother to do. For the benefit of her children, she will do anything. So here, of course, she is hearing from her husband, who is such a learned and elevated soul. So there was no doubt that what he is advising is definitely going to help. So with full trust and faith in her husband and his instructions, she observed the vrata. And true to her expectations and the promise made by her husband, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before her. So in text number 4, some features and appearances of the Lord are described. That dressed in yellow garments and bearing a conch shell, disc, club and lotus in his 4 hands, then appeared before Aditi. So here we say Pita Vasas. Pita Vasas means the yellow, dressed in yellow garment. The other name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also Pitambar. Again, Pita means yellow, and one who is dressed in yellow garments is also called Pitambar, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's another interesting point which we can talk about here before we move forward, that what is the relationship between demigods and demons? Do you know? They are opposite, okay. But that's not the relationship, yes. Okay. Suval Prabhu will give the answer I'm looking for. Yes, they are the same father. And their mothers are sisters. So Aditi and Diti, they are sisters, and both were married to Kashyap Muni. So imagine that one sister has given birth to Aditya. She is called to Adityas. Adityas are demigods, and Diti has given birth to demons. So it is said that Diti herself was not of that demonic nature, but because at the time of conceiving, her consciousness was not right. Her consciousness was corrupt. That's why she gave birth to all the demons. So that's why it is very important for us in our normal day-to-day life to have proper consciousness, because even unexpectedly we may do things which can really cause a lot of distress and difficulty for us later on. So let's move forward. Now, these verses help us also to answer so many questions which we may come across again in our day-to-day life, especially for those who go out for preaching. I'm sure you are asked these questions again and again. And one very important question which people may ask is, does God exist? Okay, you go to universities and you come across a lot of young students over there, and they have all kind of thoughts. So a number of times, there can be a discussion that, does God exist? So how do you convince a person who asks this kind of a question? What is the answer you would normally give to a person like that? Yes.
Credit to Jaini Tai for telling me this one time. He said, Prabhupada once said that when someone asked him the same question, he said, well, yeah, have you ever been to India? And the man said, no, I haven't. And he said, well, just because you've never been to India doesn't mean India doesn't exist.
Yes. Very nice. Any else? Yeah, Jai Baldev Prabhu.
Normally, I don't think I could convince him that there's maybe, like a spirit you can't see, but normally I would say everyone has to build. I'll maybe convince him try to convince him that there's a subtle aspect of life, just like everyone lies. And you can perceive the words, but the truth is carried in our mind. You can't see mind, there's no. So in other words, the invisible is more true than the visible. You can perceive my lying words, but you can't not see my truthful thoughts. Mm-hmm. So from that consensus, the invisible is more substantial than the visible. So I'll probably work from there, but as far as convincing God, that's really not up to us. That's up to them and God to convince them whether God exists.
Yeah, thank you. Just give it to him, please.
My answer to that person would be, among all the questions that people ask, this question is worth exploring. Mm-hmm. And we find answers to those questions in these books. And yes, we're inquiring from these books about these questions, and then how they answer, maybe I would continue from there.
That's very nice when you have books with you. So it's all the more reason to always have some books with you, because then you can use that also as a reason to convince other person to read the books. I would like to share an answer which I heard from somebody, and it really was very interesting, especially because we are talking to non-devotees. It's very easy to convince a devotee, but to a non-devotee, there can be big arguments. And this particular conversation happened on a flight, in the aircraft. And there was a ISKCON sannyasi sitting next to a passenger, and they entered into a conversation, and the person sitting next to he was not convinced, and he was questioning the existence of God. So the sannyasi asked him that, what do you do by profession? And this gentleman said he is an engineer. As a matter of fact, he had an important role to play in construction of that particular aircraft. He was working for Boeing company. So he said, oh, you work for a Boeing company? That's very nice. And you helped in making this aircraft. So did you work all by yourself? He said, no way. There were thousands of people who worked on this project. There were several engineers, there were technicians, there were electricians. There were so many people who worked on, on making this Boeing aircraft. So then he said, oh, that's interesting. And how does this fly? So he said, obviously, we put, gasoline in it, and there's aviation fuel, and so long there is fuel in the aircraft, it flies. So he said, how far you think with the full tank it will fly? And he gave him some figure like 10,000 miles or whatever. He gave that figure. So he said, now, so many of you worked, and you had to put so much of, aviation fuel in this, and there have to be pilots in the cockpit to fly it in the right direction and make sure that it reaches its destination. So there are so many people involved in it. Now think of Earth. It is thousands of times bigger than this particular aircraft. It is thousands of times heavier than this aircraft. And it has been flying for thousands of years. And nobody is controlling it. Can you believe that? So he said he had a question mark on his face. So obviously there is somebody who's controlling that. And that person who's controlling it is the God. So there's another interesting thought which came to my mind this morning as I was getting ready to come, is we look at a human body. I don't know how many of you have thought of it. Every part of the body is at the right place. When we try to make something, we do a lot of experiments. We try to put this there and the other part over there, and then we see, oh no, this is not the right thing, right location. We move, the parts here and there. But imagine the human body is so perfect that everything, the eyes, nose, mouth, hands, everything is at the right place. Imagine if our eyes were at the back. So everything will be so different then. But so to do something like this, you have to be some really exceptionally brilliant person. A neurosurgeon in India, a very, very famous neurosurgeon in India, was once asked the same question. And he said, you have to look once at human brain. When the skull is open, just look at the brain, and then you will never ask this question again. So here, the answer which we are getting to our questions is even more advanced, because the Lord has appeared before Aditi. So since the Lord has appeared, there is no doubt about it that He does not exist. Something which does not exist cannot appear before you. Then the other interesting information which we are getting here is the form of the Lord. So in this verse and the previous verses, the form of the Lord is described. So this is another question which actually we discuss quite a bit, whether the Lord is, even several people who believe in existence of God, they do not believe in that he has a form. That is the impersonal or Mayavadi philosophy. So here the features of God are described. So we also can conclude from here that God has a form. Then the next two verses are really again quite explanatory for us. That what was the reaction of Aditi on seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So it says here in verse number 5, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead became visible to Aditi's eyes, Aditi was so overwhelmed by transcendental bliss that she at once stood up and then fell to the ground like a rod to offer the Lord her respectful obeisances. Aditi stood silently with folded hands, unable to offer prayers to the Lord. Because of transcendental bliss, tears filled her eyes, and the hairs on her body stood on end. Because she could see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, she felt ecstasy, and her body trembled. So, we can talk about it for a few minutes. Number of people come to our temple, and they take darshan of Shri Shri Kishore Kishori, Jagannath Baldev, Subhadra Maharani, Gaur Nitai. They take darshan of the deities, but all of them have a different feeling when they are looking at the deities. If you ask a person who is atheist, who doesn't believe in existence of God, to come and look at our deities, he will come here and he will look at them, and he will have no reaction whatsoever. Whereas a devotee, when he looks at the deities, he has some feelings in his heart, and there may be some kind of prayers he may be, saying in his mind to the deities. So this is explained. Our acharyas explained that depending on the nature of the person who is coming in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the reaction will be different. So we have several instances. For example, when, say, Pandavas and Duryodhan and Kauravas, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, he was there in their assembly. And Pandavas looked at the Lord as the Supreme Personality, whereas for Duryodhana and his brothers, he was just any other ordinary human being. So the Lord was there, but just because they were non-devotees, they couldn't really realize his, presence in that form. There are several other cases. There is a very interesting one. Is Dhruv Maharaj. You know the story of Dhruv? Does anybody do not know? Everybody knows about Dhruv Maharaj. Okay. So when Dhruv Maharaj was, meditating upon the holy name of the Lord in the forest, the Lord appeared before him. And because Dhruv Maharaj was meditating with such intense, focus that he could see the presence of Lord in his heart. He could really see the Paramatma feature of the Lord in his heart. So when the Lord appeared before him, and Dhruv Maharaj opened his eyes, he was quite bewildered, he was quite confused, because something which he few moments ago saw in his heart, the same thing, or the same person is standing right in front of him. So he was wondering, how is it possible? And then the Lord touched his head with his conch, and then he understood what it was. There's another example of this ecstasy on seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead that was exhibited by Lord Chaitanya himself. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Puri and he saw Lord Jagannath in the temple, he fainted. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was the great Acharya of those times, he saw it and he wasn't very sure whether it is a genuine, or there was some fake unconsciousness. So he, being such a a great acharya, he was able to. He actually performed. Came close to him and observed him nicely, and then he was able to really understand that this is genuine ecstasy and not just fake one. So depending on the nature of the person, there will be a different kind of a feeling. So here we see that Aditi is exhibiting those symptoms. Now, Lord came in front of Shishupal, Lord came in front of Kansa, Lord came in front of Hiranyakashipu, but they did not react the same way as Aditi reacted. That's the difference I'm just trying to say, that depending on the nature of a person, you will see things very differently. And something for us, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, that a devotee shouldn't really expect to see the Lord prematurely. So what does it mean? That until we are really ready, we shouldn't be hankering to see the Lord. Because if we see when we are not really mature, we won't really know what to do. So he says that for us, especially for people who are practicing and still growing in Krishna consciousness, the best thing is to do their service. And he says that do your service in such a nice way that you don't have to ask for, you don't have to say that, okay, I want to look at the Lord. The Lord will be looking at you. And he says that's what important for a devotee, that the Lord himself is looking at you, that who is this great devotee of mine, who is serving so nicely. And this reminds me of a story which I think I might have shared with you, but no harm in repeating it. There is a devotee in Juhu temple who lost his eyesight, who is blind. And still, he had been coming to the temple every single day. Every day in the morning, he will be there at the temple. And several people will observe him that, he's blind, he comes there, he spends some time, chants for some time, and then goes back. So one young person, he had been observing it for several months, and one day he was able to gather enough courage and come to this devotee and ask him. He says, since when are you blind? So he says, since my childhood. I was born blind. He said, still, you come to the temple every day. When you come here, you cannot really see anything. So why do you come here? So he said, I cannot see anything, but he can see me. So that's why I come. So this is how, a devotee may think. So Aditi, she was totally kind of, being in ecstasy. She really didn't know in the beginning how to react to the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then, because she was not an ordinary person. Just imagine that a person whom the Supreme Personality of Godhead agreed to accept her as his mother, cannot be an ordinary person, isn't it? And she is married to Kashyap Muni, who himself is a great devotee of the Lord. So she somehow gathered herself and then started to say her prayers. But another important thing here is that she appeared as though drinking through her eyes the Supreme Lord. So, imagine, I was just trying to imagine this scene when a devotee is standing in front of the Lord and drinking that beauty. They say the presence of the Lord is like nectar. So, in other words, and what do you do with the nectar? Nothing else but drink. So, Aditi is drinking that presence of the Lord in the nectarian form through her eyes. So, this is a real feast for the eyes to see the Lord. So, this is what I was trying to say, that when we come in presence of the deities, when we go to a temple and look at the deities, it's a feast for our eyes. It's really something like that. Whereas for a non-devotee, it is just another, maybe idol of stone or just some pictures, etc. So depending on our own consciousness, we will look at these situations differently. And there is another interesting thing which I think I could share with you, is the Lord appeared before her as Ramapati, the husband of all good fortune, or the husband of goddess of fortune. So in India, a lot of people, we worship goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the goddess of fortune. Because everybody wants Lakshmi, everybody wants money, so they forget Narayana, but they remember Lakshmi, and they focus only on Lakshmi. So I heard something very, very interesting about it, which I shared with a lot of people, my friends and my family members also in India, that Lakshmi is a very, very chaste wife. So she will be there where Lord is. So just pray to the Lord, and if Lord is there, Lakshmi will automatically be there. So that's another interesting thing about the Lord. So I think I would like to stop here and request for any comments, questions, etc.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Welcome back. Thank you for giving your class after so long. So
2 months.
So you were mentioning how do we convince others of God, and that brings to mind essentially how Prabhupada started the movement. He started the movement by just chanting Hare Krishna. Now there's a quote that says, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." So when we try to explain logical reasons to others, logic generally doesn't have the tendency to transform the heart, and because if they see bickering among ourselves, they're like, if your God, he could control the planets, but he can't harmonize devotees among each other, so what kind of God is that? So when we usually try to use logical argument, maybe you could expand on these points, and I don't really have a question, but maybe you could expand on this. One last point is that I appreciated one point in regards to your point is that in the 9th canto, chapter 11, I forgot what verse, I think it's 21, it mentions one very important point in regards to your point. It mentions the pastime of Lord Rama. It describes that when Lord Rama built the floating stone bridge, it says that him floating stones on the water doesn't constitute the glory of God. And I found out, I'm like, that seems pretty glorious. So then in the next verse it says, what actually constitute his glories is his characteristics, his love. And the reason I appreciate that is because if exhibiting powers, floating planets, or floating stones constitutes the glory of God, then that will also mean that Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and all the demons are also glorious because they also had powers. but the reason they weren't glorious is because they didn't have good characteristics. So can you explain some of that when we try to transform people's heart? Like, I'm the controller, I can transform your heart with just these logical explanations. And I can make you feel like crap.
See, I'll just try to give a very simple answer. We hear and we talk a lot that Vaishnavas are all very compassionate people. So, does that compassion appear in our behavior or not? Do we actually practice what we preach? So, if we exhibit all those qualities which we talk about, automatically the other persons will be convinced of. This is what was the case with Srila Prabhupada. So most of us, we lead a very, very, life of duplicity. We say so many things, but when it comes to, practicing those things which we are talking about, we think 10 times before that. Or, these things are for others to do. For me, I will only preach. But Srila Prabhupada actually practiced what he said. And like you said, that he cared so much for the people who came to him that they were really impressed with him. And that's why they really respected him and they really loved him. I have spoken to, or people share, Jitendra Prabhu is here, he himself has seen Prabhupada and met him. And several other, senior devotees of our movements who had personal contact with Srila Prabhupada. They say it very, proudly that Srila Prabhupada was very, very strict, but at the same time very loving and caring. So he, anything happened to a devotee, he will remember to inquire. Like they were, something was going on in the life of a devotee, and Srila Prabhupada was not even in that city, but he heard about it. So next time when Prabhupada was talking to him, he asked him, how is your wife, for example? And she was not well, I believe. So, he really cared about the devotees, all his disciples and anybody who came in contact with him. Not only about his disciples and people who were part of the movement, even for other people he was very, very caring. Otherwise, what would made him to, go around the whole world in very, very austere circumstances? It is not always very, pleasing and very easy to travel around, especially at that age, just because he was very, very compassionate and caring, and he really wanted to pass on the message of Lord Chaitanya to the whole world, that he traveled all around. So if we practice what we preach, we'll be successful in our endeavors. Okay. Any other comments? Suval Prabhu would like to add something.
Just a comment. I was appreciating Mother Aditi's position that through the previous chapter, because the way in the narration, the dealings between Kashyapa Muni and Aditi appear to be bewildered and affected by the modes of material nature, and the narration says like that. However, this is a personality that have the qualification of being the mother of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So is not an ordinary person. So sometimes I'm reflecting on how I approach, the narration, and now realizing, oh no, this is an eternal associate of the Lord who have the qualification of being that intimate, personality. So I was just appreciating that.
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Mother
Thank you
Aditi's.
so much for sharing this, because when we look back, there are so many instances like this, even for Mother Devaki, Yashoda. They were all must have been such great personalities. And some of them, they knew that they are mother of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But I sometimes think of Mother Yashoda. She didn't even know that her son is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and she treated him like that. She will chastise Krishna, she will, punish him, and, try to tie him with a rope and all that. So imagine the reciprocation which the Lord allowed. Nothing can happen without Lord's permission. So the reciprocation is, especially with this, these great devotees and intimate, devotees, the Lord really reciprocates so nicely. He lets them do what they want to do. And He really gets pleasure out of this. So this is really the beauty of the relationship. Thank you, Srimad Prabhu. Anything else? Karunanidhi Prabhu.
Yeah, very nice point here. In somewhere it was written that Diti addressed the Lord, that Jagyampati. That means, so can you elaborate a little bit on that point?
So this is there in, we read in Bhagavad Gita also, that, it is recommended in our, let me open this. So in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord Himself says that all the sacrifices which we perform, eventually, He is, we are doing all that to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even when we are not doing so knowingly, even unknowingly, when there are any sacrifices being performed, the benefit is actually going to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, because it says here, Srila Prabhupada says that she had performed the yajna of Vayovrata under the direction of her husband Kashyapa, and therefore she thought of the Lord as Yajnapati. So Pati is the master. So he is the master of all sacrifices. In other words, any sacrifice which we are doing is going to Vishnu. Vishnu is the ultimate person to whom all the prayers and all the sacrifices which we are engaging ourselves into. And if we perform sacrifices considering that we are doing that to please Vishnu, then with that kind of an intention, then it is always we should be actually clear about it, that whom we are trying to please by all our sacrifices. So in a number of times we are doing sacrifices to please demigods. But Krishna very clearly explains that in Bhagavad Gita, that even though people do that, but eventually he is the ultimate person to whom all those oblations, etc. will go. There was something I was reminded of, which Rupa Goswami says in Nectar of Devotion about worshipping demigods versus not worshipping them. And Srila Prabhupada says that demigods are great devotees of the Lord. That's why they are in those positions. So we have to respect them, but we do not have to really worship them. When we went to yatra this time, and even in previous yatra, specifically I remember the Puri, Jagannath Puri yatra. Before you go to the main temple of Lord Jagannath in Puri, it is recommended that you go to Shiva temple in Bhubaneswar. What is the name of that temple? Lingaraj temple. So the Lord himself wants that we come to him through his exalted devotees. And that's how sometimes we have to do in the sacrifices also. Eventually he is the master of all sacrifices. Okay, so let's stop here. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.